Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we will talk something about raising a 404 error. So you might have already know the 404 error which occurs when you try to access an invalid page on a particular website. So let's directly jump onto the website, which is the books website which we have. So this is the books homepage, and whenever you go ahead and you kind of give it an ID to this URL, so if you type in 1, that is going to redirect you to the book ID 1. But what if you actually go ahead and type in a number like 100? So even if you hit enter this time, you are still going to get a page which says details for book ID 100. But in reality, we only have 2 books currently in our database. So if you go to books, as you could see, we only have 2 books, and life actually has the book ID 1 and happiness has book ID 2. That means we should technically not have any page who has a book ID greater than 2, at least at the moment when we have only 2 books. So what we want to do here is that we actually want to display an error message whenever a person actually enters some number like 80 or any number for which the book is actually not present over there. So let's go ahead and learn how to exactly do that. So the first thing which you'll need to do is that you need to go to PyCharm, you need to go to the views file, and this thing right here, which is the detail function, actually gives us the details and the book ID. So we need to modify this code a little bit, and we need to add an exception, which is nothing but the 404 error. So the first thing which you need to do is that you actually need to import the 404 error. So you need to go here and you need to type in from Django.http import http 404. So once you have this thing imported, the next thing which you need to do is that you actually want to handle the 404 error by using a template. So instead of having this type of thing which is directly returning the HTML, let's go ahead and create a brand new template for the details as we have created for the index right here. So we already have an index here and we need a similar template for the detail. So you simply need to go over here, right click on it, go to new and create an HTML file, and let's call it as detail and hit OK, and that is actually going to create an HTML file for you. Now make sure that you don't have any of this code in that file because we will be writing the code for it from scratch. So once your template is designed, you again need to go back to views, and here what you need to do first is that you need to check if a particular book is actually present in your database. So here we use the try and accept statements or try and accept blocks so that we could actually go ahead and make that check. So you simply need to type in try, and you actually need to try to find out if a particular book is present. So you type in book equals book.objects.all, and instead of having all, what we do here is that we use the get function, which basically gets only those books which are referenced by an ID. So we type where ID equals this book underscore ID. So we type ID equals book underscore ID, and what this is going to do is that it is only going to get those books which have an ID, that is the only books which are present in the database. So our try block is actually done. Now you need to type in except to basically catch that exception. So to catch that exception, you type in book dot, and here you need to type in does not exist. So you type does not and make sure that you type this thing in capitals. So book dot does not exist. So this is an exception which you want to catch, and upon catching this exception, you want to raise the HTTP 404. So here you could type in raise, and you could type in HTTP 404, and in here you could pass in some customized message like let's say this book does not exist, and make sure that you type here exists, not exists, or else you are going to have an error. Okay, so once you're done with this thing, you're pretty much good to go. Now the only thing which you need to do is that you need to return an appropriate thing over here. So you don't need to return HTTP response, you actually need to return a render. So go right here and type in return render, And to this you obviously need to pass in the request, and after passing in the request you need to pass in a reference just like this. So for passing in the reference you need to type in books slash detail.html, because detail.html is actually the template for this right here, for this function right here. And the next thing which you need to pass in is the context. Now instead of passing in context in such way, what you could do is that you could directly pass in the context. So we need to pass in the context for book, so we simply type in, first we give double quotes, and in this double quotes we type in book, and make sure that you have this thing in single quotes, and then type in book over here. So that is actually going to pass in the context to this thing, and it is finally going to work. So once you're done with this thing, you're pretty much done designing the view. Now the next thing which you need to do is that you need to go to detail.html, which is this file, and let's simply type in the book name here, so that we will get the book name whenever we actually go ahead and go to the details page of that particular book. So once you're done with this, you're pretty much good to go. So now you simply need to save this thing. So let's go to file, click save all, return back to the server. Let's see if it's running properly, and yeah, it's running. So now if you go ahead and if you type in 1 here or 2 here, as you could see, you will have the book and all of its details over here. And if you go ahead and type in book number 1, you will have the details for book number 1. And if you go ahead and if you try to type in book number 3, I guess we got an error, but this is not what we have expected. Actually, we want our customized error to be shown here. So I guess I have messed up somewhere. So let me just go ahead and check that. Okay, so I finally realized my mistake. So the problem with the code is that you actually need to pass in the actual book class and not the book object. So we have created a book object here, and you cannot pass this thing to the does not exist. Instead you have to pass in the actual class, which is book. And also one more thing which I was confused with, this does not exists. So this is actually does not exist, and there is no s at the end, so make sure that you remove this. So I was a bit confused with this initially, but when you make these changes and when you open up Django, and if you search for any book which is available, that is let's say a book with the ID 1, you are going to get the result. And let's say if you type in a book with an ID of, let's say, 18, so in that case you are going to get an error, which is the page not found 404 error, which says that this book does not exist. So this is what we wanted, and this is how you actually raise a 404 error in Django. So this is the error which we actually want to raise when the user tries to access a certain page in our website which is not available, so the user is not confused by any irrelevant result. So previously we were getting an irrelevant result when the user actually typed in the URL of a book which never existed, and he used to get that result. But now, since we have added the 404 error, he will no longer get irrelevant pages, because now we are making a check in the database if that book is actually present, and only when the book is actually present we are giving out that particular page to the user. So that's it for this lecture, and I hope you guys were able to understand how to add a 404 error, or how to raise a 404 error when the user requests an invalid page. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.